Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar. We're really excited to be able to chat with you today about conquering 5 challenges to deliver a successful ITAM program with ServiceNow. We're especially grateful to have Jerry Frazier from Toyota with us and Chris Nielsen from Anglepoint. Again, thank you so much. Without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into the presentation by starting with introductions. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Jerry. Would you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Sure, thanks. Hey, everybody. I'm Jerry Frazier. I have about 26 years experience with Toyota, and I am the program director for the SAM team at Toyota.
Awesome. Thank you. And Chris, you want to give a quick introduction?
Sure. I'm a director at Anglepoint. I've been with Anglepoint 10 years, have about 18 years of asset management experience in helping build sustainable asset management programs across the industry. So happy to be here.
Perfect. Thanks. Great to have you both here. Let's go ahead and jump into it.
So our kind of entire goal where we work together at Toyota and in any asset management program is to get to a point of intelligent data where we know exactly what assets we own from an IT perspective, as well as how we're consuming or deploying those assets. And so this is the nirvana that we want to do. So we have this picture here that kind of signifies, kind of perfect DNA that's ordered by color and ordered in a perfect line or in a perfect shape. And that is where we want to get as we go over this time of building a sustainable asset management program. And ServiceNow is something that can help us do that as we try to build this program. Now, where we started with Toyota was we were not like that. And I'll let Jerry kind of elaborate on where he started.
Yeah, we were far from that when we first started. So in the early days before SAM existed, have a kind of a software asset management program but it was very, very simple. We used spreadsheet data for that. And mostly we did it at renewal time. So that was the way we would check entitlements, make sure everything lines up. But of course, that had lots of holes in it. We weren't really using discovery very well. We didn't have any of the tools that we have now. And the data wasn't very well trusted by management. So there were always questions, and it was just a very manual process. We did have an audit response process, but again, it was reactive. We knew how to react once it happened, but you'll see as we go through these slides, we've fixed that process, and it's much more proactive now. So in 2016, we put in place our hardware asset management. And that involved a lot about learning about process, how the ServiceNow tool works. And with that came discovery products that we started using, which helped us with processes and helped us understand the data as it related to HAM. Shortly thereafter, in around 2017, we introduced SAM into the environment, and that was a whole new experience. There was lots of data, and we didn't really know what to do with the data. We did hire a couple of implementation partners who they were new to the tool as well, and they weren't exactly able to get us where we needed to be. So yeah, that's where we wound up at that time. Then, well, I'll go back one still.
Yes.
So in 2019, we hired Anglepoint for an audit with SAP. And we ended that audit with no findings. And that was the first time that we really had some really good professional help in using the tool to help us get the data, as well as advise us on how to handle this audit. Shortly after that, we signed an IBM IASP with Anglepoint, and they did a fantastic job. They got all that in shape for us and easily understood data. And so right after that, we hired them as a managed service overall. So Chris.
Yes, and so then what we've done here, from around this world of kind of making progress over time, from 2022 on, we've organized this data even further from an asset management perspective, where we kind of have this illustration here of the dots are kind of closer together, in line. And we did things where we have a managed service, like Jerry said, where we started out looking at exactly what Toyota was purchasing from an asset manager or from a software perspective, and looking at over the last several years doing a prioritization of, well, what are we going to go after, right? We're not going to try to go after everything because that's too much, and we don't have, we want to focus our resources appropriately. So we looked at prioritizing our software by looking at, okay, what has Toyota spent money on? And we organize that by spend, obviously, how complex the publisher is, how dynamic their metrics are, how likely are they to audit, and how strategic they were to Toyota itself. And we prioritized how we would attack those publishers that way. So, we did a full Microsoft effective license position. We did an Oracle one. We did, as Jerry mentioned, an SAP, a Red Hat. And these helped us kind of understand from a data perspective where we were. And for the first time ever, we were able to show and do those effective license positions largely from within the tool, within ServiceNow, which was a huge step forward. So as we move forward into 2024 and beyond, and we try to get to that spot of intelligent data or knowledge, we're going to be doing things like bringing in the data specifically for IBM, and to be able to perhaps eliminate the need for ILMT and use ServiceNow to gather that data and feed the reporting requirement to report to IBM our IBM consumption data, which is a huge milestone and would be very a step forward for us in terms of speed to value in our data. So let's now go through the exact 5 challenges that helped us get we overcame the challenges to get to the point where we were able to look and have better organized, intelligent data going forward. So what was the first challenge, Jerry?
Yeah, good question. So probably one of the biggest challenges, and I don't think it's unique to Toyota, but probably to all companies that are embarking on this journey, is we don't know what we own, and we didn't know what we owned. I've been with the company at Toyota, like I said, for 26 years. When I first hired in, we were buying software like water out of a fire hose. Like, it was just coming in like crazy because it was fairly new, and everyone was discovering it as an answer to business problems. And the main problem was that they weren't buying software in the way we might do it today. They were just buying it. They were just signing contracts, having it come in. The POs were sloppy. The contracts were sloppy. Nobody was at fault necessarily. They just didn't know. They were just buying stuff and installing it and using it. So the challenge we had is going back, and I'm not saying we're going back 25 years, but even going back, 5 years or 10 years, became a problem for us, became really a difficult, thing to do. The discipline of what we need in place in order to understand our entitlements very clearly wasn't necessarily there. But thanks to the help from Anglepoint, they were able to straighten us out, tell me what was missing, tell us what else we needed, and we were able to provide that, and they were able to put that together for us.
So if we look at kind of exactly what Jerry's illustrating here in what all companies basically deal with, is this idea of you have your parent company, and how do you buy software? Well, you might have different acquired companies that are buying on their own, because you bought them and they're doing their own thing and they're buying software outside of the normal process or within their process, and they don't want to participate in the centralized process. Then on top of that, you're buying direct from publisher X, Y, and Z perhaps, and maybe there's overlap where the same acquired entity is buying from that publisher as well and has an agreement. On top of that, you might be buying software from resellers, not directly from publishers. And there might be overlap across those other 2 buckets we just talked about, where you're buying the same publisher from direct as well as in a reseller. Then you might have different business units within your company that want to go and buy their own thing. Maybe they use a P card, or they don't want to follow the normal process. And this kind of loses visibility across the entire process. Then we might also have cloud, that you're buying marketplace software directly in the cloud and is separated as well. And then finally, kind of shadow IT or SaaS spend, putting on a credit card and getting the software. So all of this mess, if you will, I call it, it's like the software salad, if you will, is what kind of, Jerry was talking about, is very common that we see companies deal with when they're trying to get a handle on what they actually own. So how we tackled this at Toyota, we tried to automate and perhaps connect the data and do some fancy integration, but that's not really possible yet. And I hope with AI in the coming years that we'll be able to get there. But instead, as we looked in the data, Jerry gave us access to their procurement system where we could read-only grab data for any given publisher and understand exactly what was purchased. We could see that the level of detail that SAM needs, that ITAM needs, is buried deep inside the PR or the PO level. It's in a quote, in an attached PDF sometimes. And that data was not readily exportable or able to feed into ServiceNow on a kind of automated basis. So instead, the experts at Anglepoint, we pull that data for the publishers in scope, and using the expertise that ServiceNow has, and it's so great that they have the content library that can look up part numbers, that can look up entitlement models, and take the data that we're finding and make it quicker to import into a readily usable format inside of ServiceNow. And you can have an authoritative source of data that is clean and accurate. And then once we have the data imported inside of ServiceNow, we then flow through into the normalization, where we're looking to make sure that that data matches how ServiceNow is seeing it, right? So if the part number matches the metric that we then want to count it on, is it a user-based metric? Is it a processor-based metric? And it's an iterative approach where we go back and then check that against what was reviewed and what was uploaded. And then we repeat the process over again as new items are purchased. And sometimes, if we're only buying on a yearly basis, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's semi-annually, or maybe it's monthly, depending on the frequency of the purchases. And so this is really how we were able to overcome that reactive approach that Jerry talked about, and for our most important and strategic key publishers, get to a point of strength and authoritative data for our entitlements.
Yeah, so I view this challenge as part two of the first challenge. So first, you got to figure out what your entitlements are, and Anglepoint helped with that. The second part is, how do you see what's deployed? And it's not quite as easy as just, letting Discovery find everything and you're done. For one thing, at our company, and I'm sure other companies have this issue, is we have areas that are just totally offline. So those are primarily our design engineers. They hold the secrets and they're not even connected to the internet. So we can't even see what those are. But beyond that, there are issues. There are just inherent issues with discovery tools that you have to work through with the discovery team, or people who know, how to fine tune that so it works better. There's a lot to this piece. I'm probably missing a couple pieces, but you don't believe everything you see right off the bat. You have to so having the challenge one that we talked about with the entitlements really helped us, say, oh, why are these ones missing? Where are these? And we had to go do that investigation.
Yeah, like Jerry said, we paid for something. Why aren't we seeing it in Discovery? And if we don't see it there and it's not really there, then why are we paying for it, right? So I think and this is an AI kind of representation of a messy CMDB, or our journey to get to a clean and organized CMDB. And what our goal there was, is that the data amount is staggering if you just turn it on, and trying to organize it can be daunting. And who has the most incentive for clean and accurate data? It's the asset management team. And so as we go through this data and trying to make sense of it together with Jerry, we're trying to figure out, are there things missing? Is the data inaccurate? So constantly we were tracking kind of completeness, looking at, okay, what's our denominator? We found, 100 servers. Should there be 200? Should there be 1,000? And are those servers represented correctly? Are all the fields for those servers completed. So sometimes, in licensing, perhaps with Windows Server, it's important to know, is it a production server? Is it a non-production server? And sometimes those fields aren't always filled out because they're manually filled in by process. And that affects licensing, that affects compliance. And so having those fields filled out correctly are key for us to having accurate, complete data. We also looked at things like where software would be reporting on a device that hadn't been scanned in 6 months. Why was that? Were we supposed to count that software, or should that software have been quote unquote removed from the CMDB because it no longer existed? And so making sure all of those checks and balances were flowing were key. And we would bring those to Jerry and to his team's attention, and then they would go and figure out how to remedy those in the CMDB so that it would be accurate. But this led to an idea of having a CMDB that could be trusted, at least for the publishers that were tracking, and it was kind of this maturing one step at a time to get better data with each product or each publisher that we were checking, and making sure it reflected exactly what was being consumed.
So challenge 3, this one's important. It's very important to understand. So before we brought Anglepoint in, the way we actually did have a priority on our vendors, and we didn't necessarily look at complexity. We looked at dollar amount, right? So we sorted by dollar amount. We said, okay, these top 10, that's it. And I mean, pretty much. And so, but that isn't necessarily what defines complexity. Complexity could be a lot of things. It could be a publisher that just has a very aggressive audit program within their own company. It could be a lot of different things. So when we brought in Anglepoint, that's the first thing they did. They kind of, and they didn't ask for what we thought was important. They just said, send me your vendor list and all the data that goes behind that. So we sent the vendors and the dollar amounts and some various pieces of data. They came up with a pretty different list, which was impressive. So Chris, you want to take it from there?
Yes. So what this also meant for us was that these are the publishers that aren't necessarily counted in the way that we saw in Challenge 2, where we're just counting servers, we're just counting users, right? These are things that needed extra attention in ServiceNow to get accurate consumption and deployment. So are we connecting to the M365 portal? Are we connecting to USMM in SAP? Are we connecting to Oracle Glass and connecting to each database individually so that we can track the options and packs that are licensed on each Oracle database? And so we had to then dive into each publisher and work specifically with the right stakeholders at Toyota to broker those connections. And some of them are quite difficult, as Jerry can attest to, getting them to work, as they're very fragile and they need a very specific configuration. And so as we went on this journey, I just want to talk a couple in particular. But SAP, there were several ABAP systems that we would pull manual reports from. And if any of you listening have done an SAP review or an SAP audit, you know how complex these USMM reports are that must be pulled. And they're snapshots, they're text, they're kind of ugly, and they take a very specific knowledge to understand and interpret them so that you can apply the right licenses to the users in those USMM reports. And so we did that and came up with a report, and then we fed that data back to the SAP security team at Toyota, and were able to have them make significant changes to the users, which was a huge cost savings to Toyota. And this was a big deal, right? Because we were able to normalize and reconcile our users appropriately. And then what we did is we deployed the SAP Publisher Pack in ServiceNow so that those USMM reports would flow through automatically into ServiceNow on a regular basis, so that we wouldn't have to bother the security team and pull those manual reports on on a semi-annual or annual basis. We could get them on a weekly basis if we wanted, by just pulling and talking to those systems. And then it also lined up directly with our entitlement within ServiceNow to give us a view of, if we had professional users or platform users and show what our user counts were and where perhaps we could do some harvesting or cleanup within the tool. Another example where we complex publisher was with Microsoft. Now, here's a list from ServiceNow of all of the Microsoft products that ServiceNow found when we turned it on and connected to Discovery and our M365 portal. And you can see it was only 27% compliant. Now, that's not an accurate depiction of what actually was reality, but this is what it saw when it first pulled the data because of misaligned models or entitlement that wasn't correct, or devices that were showing deployment, but there was no software actually installed, and we needed to clean those up. And so that was a multi-month endeavor to take the knowledge and expertise of someone that knows SAM and also knows ServiceNow to get it lined up and remove products from here that, you know, Jerry and his team don't want to care about on a daily basis, like Minecraft or IIS or, you know, some of these other products that just aren't critical or, you know, strategic, if you will. And so after all of that, we were able to get to a point where you know, we are 100% compliant in the tool perspective, showing exactly what entitlement we own and that we had enough to cover the deployments or consumption in that list. You can also see the products list is much shorter, as we talked about. Now, that's not to say that the list on the left is bad. That is ServiceNow basically processing over 4.5 million install records and subscription records and condensing it down into about 80 products, which I think is phenomenal and is a great job of what the tool can do. We just took it a step further, kind of a higher level even, to what Toyota wants to manage on a day-to-day basis to make sure that they're in compliance with their most important and strategic products. So challenge number 4.
Yeah, challenge number 4, the data isn't actionable. What do you do with the data? You see this information, what do you do with it? How do you manage it? So I'm gonna go back to the last slide just real quick. So if you look at the before, so this before is even after Anglepoint was doing some work on it. This was kind of midstream. They were looking at it and kind of dealing with it. It was worse than that when I first looked at it. And I would tell you, when I looked at this, I didn't know what to do. I'm just like, it looks like what is all this stuff? What do I do with it? How do I manage it? So that's definitely the value that Anglepoint brings to the table. The other thing is that my goal, this is kind of, well, my goal was to I wanted the audits to be, especially the ones we managed, to be very fast. My goal was, you know, no more than 30 days from the time I get a notice until we close. We're not quite there yet. We're still working on that, just because some of these things are very, very complicated. But we are getting much, much closer. We're seeing much faster results from, you know, this data, and we do know what to do now. We know how to act on it. So I think it's working really, really well. But at first, it's very, very difficult to look at the data, even know where to turn. So,
right. So I wanted to just break out in general how we see the levers you can pull when you have the data, and what actions you can take based on the data, whether it be in ServiceNow or you know, having your effective license positions. What do you do? So we have this box here that represents what we own or what we're entitled to. And that is a certain reality. And then on the other side, we have what is consumed or what is deployed. And these don't always line up. And that is the whole crux of our existence, right? And we want these to line up. And so what happens if they don't line up? Well, if we own something and we're not deploying it, then we should probably get rid of it or cancel it. You know, cancel the maintenance, cancel the subscription if possible. And on the flip side, if we are using or deploying something and consuming it, but we don't own it, we should probably uninstall it or deprovision it. Now, there's the third box, and that is what we're actually using or getting value from. And that isn't necessarily what is deployed, because you might have deployed something that you're not using. So what if you are using something and you've consumed it, but you're not, if you don't own it, what should you do? You should go buy it. You should purchase it. And on the flip side, if you own it, but you're using it, or excuse me, you own it and you've consumed it or deployed it, but you're not using it, what should you do? You should probably cancel that maintenance or that subscription and uninstall it. And then finally, what we're trying to get to in the middle of these three is our optimized state, where we own it, we've deployed it, and we need it, we were using it. And that is the optimized state. And so all these different scenarios is what we can execute based on the data that we have now in ServiceNow for any given publisher product, because it tells us exactly where we stand for any of these things. Now, let me zoom in a little bit. Where we want to get to is this nirvana. And I think of this like if you've ever played with magnets as a kid and you try to put the two north poles together and it just kind of mashes together and they don't want to go. That's how this feels like. And we're constantly efforting to try to get to this 95% spot for even a moment. Or and understand that yes, this is what we own, this is what we've consumed, and what we use. And so it's constantly moving dartboard, but we're trying it all the time to just keep it as close as we can to this state. And ServiceNow helps us do that with speed because we have the data now in the tool, and we're not in a necessarily just a point in time on a spreadsheet or in a screenshot. We can have it pulled from different systems and pulled from the CMDB, pulled from portals to accurately represent our usage and compare against our entitlement at any given time.
All right, my favorite, challenge 5. So, sometimes with software asset management, the complexity of the problem is very difficult to explain. And I want to say straight out, Toyota leadership they're very bright individuals, they're very capable. It's not a them problem, it's a me problem, but it's hard to explain multiple years of issues that has caused SAP or caused some Oracle to get to where it is. And I like to over explain. I try to explain every detail and it just gets caught up. And so I kind of stopped doing that because Anglepoint basically gives me the tools and the leverage to be able to very easily explain to management what's going on at any given time. And the most important part that we've got out of this now is that management trusts the data. So I don't have to go into long explanations. I can just show, in a couple sentences, I can say, here's where we are. And they go, okay, great. They give me a thumbs up and we move on. Chris?
That's right. Yeah, and so here's a kind of a framework. We've tried different versions of this at Toyota. I'll let Jerry explain the one we were at once I explain kind of the general one. And it's this idea where you have your ITAM service in the middle there, and that might be a mixture of your own internal team. So in this case, Jerry, and then you might have some extra horsepower with a managed service provider like Anglepoint, who might be doing some licensing management expertise or some tooling expertise. And they interact with all these different stakeholders in these different groups. It might be with information security or procurement or product owners or IT finance or FinOps in your cloud. And each one of those groups should have a leader or a stakeholder that has the ability to wear an ITAM hat, a SAM hat for at least a little while to understand how the data in our systems, in the CMDB or in our in our effective license positions, how it affects them and how they can use it to their advantage. So in the case of procurement, they might be using our data to help fuel a negotiation, to give them the ammo they need to negotiate from a point of strength. Or IT finance might be using it to say, hey, this is how we're going to do chargeback based on the data that Sam has given me, based on I know who's using Adobe Photoshop now, and I'm going to charge appropriately to the different businesses. Or it might be the product owners who are saying, you know what, I need to know who's using this product and how much they're using. Or security, I need to know what to patch, or there's a vulnerability. I'm going to use the SAM data to figure out exactly where that version is within our CMDB. And so having stakeholders and having that line of communication open with them is critical. And then on top of that is this idea of a steering committee with governance. And you can meet often or you can meet kind of as needed, but having that kind of lines open is critical so they understand, like Jerry said, the kind of the ebbs and flows of what's going on in asset management and how it affects them and how it affects perhaps the bottom line going forward, and there aren't surprises.
Right. Yeah, so I just want to add a little bit to that, Chris, where when we first, Anglepoint first introduced this, and I tried to implement it almost like you see on the screen. Like I tried to, okay, we're going to centralize, we're going to, have all these people come to a meeting and once a month or whatever we decided. I think it was monthly, and it was going okay. But what it was happening is I was winding up just giving a readout to what I've done the previous month and what was coming up, and there wasn't a lot of engagement because some of the people didn't even need to be there. To be quite honest, if a product owner from SAP, let's say they come to the meeting, but we're not talking about SAP, it was kind of a waste of their time. So we had a lot of people that weren't participating. And so what we decided to try is now we have a distributed system. So each of the people from these groups, they know who they are and they know they're part of this process. I talk to them often enough where they're aware of what's going on. But if we have an issue or we have a problem or we have just something we have to talk about, we call in the product owner, we call in the right person, like maybe procurement, maybe we need somebody from security. We talk to those three people one-on-one and just tell them what's happening, what information we need, or we share whatever we need to share. And then later on in some other format, I'll report that out to everyone. So everyone's kind of aware, what we're doing and what's going on, just in case there's some other involvement we need that we didn't know we needed. So it's worked out so well so far. And I'm just saying this to say that, you don't have to do it exactly like it is on the paper and have this organized structure. You can have a very deconstructed kind of team as long as everyone knows they're part of that and you engage them, frequently enough where they feel like they're part of that team.
Right. I think that's right. Jerry said it best. I mean, as long as they know that, in my experience, that Sam knows, or that these teams know that Sam can help them and that they can trust the data, right? Then they can come to us when they need it, or if we need to tell them something, and there's a good back and forth there that builds it's a synergy, if you will. Yeah. So. Okay.
All right. So I love this picture. It's so awesome. But I just want to say ServiceNow SAM Pro is this is a Toyota Supra. The name Supra is derived from the Latin prefix meaning above or to surpass or go beyond. This car can go 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds and requires a skilled driver, that's my team, to produce its full value. Anglepoint is like the pit crew for this race car, as they provide full support expertise to make this car reach its full potential. Like the Supra, SAM Pro is a powerful asset management tool, but it takes skill and expertise to be able to get it to perform to its full potential. This is why you need somebody like Anglepoint to guide and teach you the best way to get the value out of ServiceNow SAM Pro application.
Yes, so thank you, Jerry. We're really grateful you're able to join us today as we talk about our journey to intelligent data. And we thank you for being here and hope you have a great day.
Absolutely. You too, Chris. Thank you so much.